Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving straight into a stunning historical standoff from the year 624 CE. The Arabian Peninsula at this time was an absolute powder keg of tension, and what happened in the deep desert didn't just settle some local dispute, it literally changed the trajectory of the world. We're going to explore the Battle of Badr, unpack the incredible narrative of how true strength was tested, and discover exactly why this single event remains one of the most remarkable turning points in Islamic history.
Section 1. The Ultimate Underdog Story.
Picture this: a vast, arid desert at sunrise. The silence of the morning is heavy, and standing right in the middle of this expanse is an incredibly small force of just 313 believers. Now, when you think about major historical confrontations, 313 is barely a fraction of a typical army, and it's really vital to remember exactly who these individuals were. These weren't seasoned, battle-hardened soldiers. Many were just ordinary people, standing together on the battlefield, facing an impending clash that would test absolutely everything they believed in.
And staring them down on the other side of that desert expanse, an opposing army of nearly 1,000 enemies. But it wasn't just a simple matter of being outnumbered 3-1. Those 1,000 men represented the formidable elite of their society. They were absolutely overflowing with confidence, they were well-funded, heavily armed, and they were marching with a singular expectation of total dominance. The stakes here were terrifyingly high.
Section 2. Facing impossible odds.
When you look at the stark physical reality, the contrast is just undeniably wild. On one side, you've got this tiny, poorly equipped group severely lacking in numbers. And on the other, a massive, aggressively advancing military force armed with the absolute best weaponry of the era. The contrast couldn't possibly be sharper. And honestly, the impending doom for the smaller force seemed all but certain.
Let's break that down a bit. The believers were facing physical and psychological hurdles that were basically designed to break the human spirit. They're severely outnumbered, they're wildly under-equipped for a battle of this scale, but maybe most devastatingly, they were stranded far from home. Remember the context here. These were people who had already been exiled, driven from their homes, and now they found themselves cornered in an unforgiving desert. Pretty much any one of those factors would shatter a normal army's morale. Yet, despite being cornered and outgunned, their faith in Allah was far, far stronger than any physical weapon they could have carried into that sand.
Section 3. The Night of Prayer.
So, when human logic tells you that defeat is imminent, where do you turn? The leadership and spiritual anchor in this terrifying moment was the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Instead of succumbing to fear or panicking over the lack of equipment, the Prophet Muhammad spent the entire night with his hands raised in sincere, heartfelt prayer. While the very real threat of a massive, elite army loomed in the dark just beyond their camp, he asked Allah for victory. It was this profound moment of spiritual grounding that really set the tone for everyone.
And that right there perfectly defines the concept of complete trust. This wasn't just some desperate, hopeful wish tossed into the night sky. The believers placed their complete and absolute reliance on Allah for victory, fully acknowledging, yet looking right past the overwhelming physical odds stacked against them. This kind of profound internal and spiritual preparation, it laid the exact foundation for what was about to happen next on the physical battlefield.
Section 4. The Turning Point.
The whole battle followed this incredible narrative arc. It moved from that terrifying sunrise standoff into a deeply tense night of prayer, which suddenly gave way to an explosive natural and spiritual phenomenon before ultimately ending in a peaceful sunset. When intense spiritual preparation collided with harsh physical reality, it sparked an unbelievable sequence of events.
Because out of absolutely nowhere, a sweeping sandstorm completely altered the dynamic of the battlefield. The environment itself just shifted. But this wasn't just some chaotic weather event. This fierce storm effectively blinded the heavily armed enemy forces, totally disrupting their coordination. And simultaneously, it provided a literal and psychological smokescreen for the vastly outnumbered believers, giving them unprecedented cover and momentum to advance.
So the mechanics of this turning point really unfold in 3 distinct phases. First, by Allah's permission, victory is set in motion. Second, driven by that complete trust we just talked about, the Muslim army advances with immense, almost unthinkable courage right through the roaring storm. And third, the astonishing, outright defeat of the much larger, infinitely better equipped enemy army. Against all worldly logic, the impossible had actually just happened.
Section 5. Changing Islamic History.
By the time a peaceful desert sunset fell over the year 624 CE, the silence that returned to the desert marked the beginning of an entirely new era. The world had fundamentally shifted, but we really have to ask, why did this specific clash change Islamic history forever? Well, here is the core reason: the defeat of a massive, heavily armed military force by just 313 poorly equipped men proved definitively that true strength comes from faith and obedience to Allah, not from numerical superiority, not from physical resources. This single event cemented Badr as the ultimate turning point because it proved to all future generations that physical odds simply do not dictate the final outcome when complete trust is present.
And this brilliant historical legacy is perfectly captured and immortalized directly in the Qur'an. Chapter 3, verse 123 reads, "Indeed, Allah helped you at Badr when you were weak." It's a permanent reminder etched into history, teaching generation after generation that ultimate victory belongs entirely to Allah, not to mere numbers, wealth, or worldly power. So, as we wrap up this explainer on the incredible, paradigm-shifting underdog victory at the Battle of Badr, I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to carry with you. When you find yourself outnumbered, under-equipped, or facing what feels like totally impossible odds in your own life, will you remember where true strength actually comes from? Will you remember this lesson? Thank you so much for joining me today to explore this incredible piece of history.